By far the most common problem my students encounter with their websites is the dreaded broken links and missing graphics and other problems caused by bad links or missing files. Almost all of these problems are caused by two things: inadequate organization and/or a misunderstanding of how directory structures work with HTML. So let me provide some information about how to write your links and also for organizing your files to avoid these common problems. Early web servers were dominantly Unix-based, and the web technologies have kept the same conventions as you would use in Unix for keeping track of files. For example, writing correct URL path names in HTML requires your folders, which are called directories in Unix, to be organized in a strict hierarchical structure. You should also never change any of your folder structures while you're constructing your websites, and definitely don't change your folder structure after you've created the website. Figure 6.1 here is a typical file structure or folder structure for a small website. The topmost directory in the structure is called the root directory. A URL designates this directory with a /. So for example, if you were to type this URL in the browser, you would go to the root directory of this website, yoursite.com. Now the problem comes because the root directory can itself contain subdirectories, each of which can also contain their own subdirectories, which in turn can contain still more subdirectories, and so on. So figure 6.1 shows 4 subdirectories under the root directory: www, library, CGI bin, and FTP, and then 2 more subdirectories or subfolders within the www subfolder. Now, a path name, also referred to as file addressing, is the notation that you would use in HTML to direct a browser to a particular file or directory or subfolder in this structure here. It directs the browser along a particular path to find a specific file, such as pic2.ping or file1.htm down here in the HTML subfolder. There are 2 different methods for writing path names in a web document. You can write absolute path names, or you can write relative path names. You'll want to avoid the unpleasant task of fixing a lot of broken links on your site by choosing the appropriate pathing method before you even start building your website. Now, absolute paths always start from the root directory. These types of paths are easy to identify because they always contain a complete URL that takes the form similar to this right here, http://www.thedomainname.com. Now these types of paths are much longer than the other types of paths, relative paths. They not only take a lot more typing, but they also have to be recoded if any of your linked files get moved. So you want to avoid using absolute links except when you are linking to files on other servers that are outside of your control. Now, in contrast, document relative paths direct a browser to a path relative to your current page. These paths omit one or more elements of the complete URL. Since the current page is the point of departure, the elements leading up to the document name are not needed. For example, the absolute path to my home page, index.htm on my website, is http://www.geekmanuals.com/index.htm. The absolute path of a button graphic on my home page is this right here. Same address, /pic1.gif. Now you'll notice that both files have very similar addresses. Since both files are in the same directory, this path right here, the http www.geekmanuals.com, is found on both paths. And since they're the same, I can omit the duplicated segments of the path by using a document relative path to link to the graphic. So the shortened path to the graphic in a relative path would simply just read pic1.gif, and that's it. Notice that the p is lowercase here because the p is lowercase over there in that path. So this is much better, right? This is not only easier to type, but because the path is relative, I can change my site to another server, and this link here will still be valid. In contrast, if I were to write all my links using absolute pathing, and then I were to move my website to a different server, all of my links would be broken and I would need to relink them. Now, one word of warning: when you do use relative path names, always save a new document before creating your links. Document relative paths cannot be created without a definite starting point, so saving the file creates that starting point in the folder in which the document is saved. If you create a document relative path before saving the file, many authoring programs, such as Dreamweaver or FrontPage, will start the path with a notation that will cause a broken link when the page is moved or uploaded to the server. Oftentimes you'll recognize these links in these authoring programs with this nomenclature: file, colon, and then there'll be 3 slashes. If you hand code, this won't be a problem, but if you like to use an HTML editor like Dreamweaver, just make sure that you save your files before starting to write your relative paths. Another warning: although more flexible, relative path names demand a firm grasp of the notation used by HTML to locate files relative to the current directory. This is where the confusion starts that gives my students so much trouble. So let me now move on to the next movie and give you some practice in writing document relative paths in HTML.